In addition to department stores, overseas clothing companies are also realizing there's money to be made in China. The market for casual clothes here is projected to grow 10% annually to reach $58 billion by 2010. A number of overseas retailers are changing the way they operate here in order to grab a bigger share of this lucrative market. This week, Ken Chan, manager at LEK Consulting, who specializes in retail strategies, talked to us about the latest trends underway. In the past, most foreign fashion brands enter the China market through an agent company. Now, is it changing? Because recently we see quite some brands are actually buying back the rights from their agents.
Definitely. I think there are two reasons for this. The first reason is legal, and the second reason is commercial. I think the legal reason is that until 2004, at the end of 2004, China's laws were quite restrictive in how foreign retailers could operate. But after that, now people can do retail, they can source in China, they can import. Import duties have been lowered a lot. So they're much freer to use their own strengths in entering the China market.
What about the commercial aspect? Do you mean there might be a conflict of interest between the brand and the agents they use?
The conflict of interest angle is definitely there as well. For example, the interests of the agents are to make as much money as possible for themselves.
Right.
And even though there are clauses in contracts between the agents and the principals on how the stores or the concession needs to be laid out, how the clothes need to be displayed, what kind of discounts can be given, the agents, they'll maximize their own profit and not obey those rules sometimes. Agents are good for expanding quickly and for helping navigate in an unfamiliar market. One good example of fast expansion is Esprit. That's a Hong Kong brand that entered China quite early, and they use the mixed model. So they have unit stores in malls or flagship stores, like you see on Nanjing Road, that are self-owned, and those are typically very large, 800 to even 2,000 square meters. And those are directly managed to build up the brand. And at the same time, to help expand more quickly, they franchised or used agents to go to especially second or third tier city. An agent can actually help a lot in obtaining the real estate, which is very important, in dealing with sourcing, in merchandising, in finding the right sizes for Chinese people, which is also a key.
In China, most foreign fashion brands are present in shopping malls or department stores, but in other countries I noticed that they actually have a lot of flagship stores or boutique stores on high streets. And that could account for more than 50% of their total sales. So why is the situation in China different?
Well, actually, I think from being from Shanghai, you see a regional view. But when we studied the national market of China, we see very different views. In Beijing, Dalian, and Guangzhou, for example, consumers think that high street unit stores are actually low end.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and in Shenzhen, for example, people prefer to buy clothes in hypermarkets, whereas in Shanghai, people are, I think, pretty embarrassed to do that. It might be counterintuitive, but a lot of the high street or unit stores or flagships are actually money losing, and the profit is actually made in the department stores.
Why is that?
Real estate is one, and then format is the other reason. So real estate can be very, very expensive. So in order to establish a credible brand, in Shanghai, for example, the number of locations that you could set up is very limited. You have Nanjing Road, you have Huaihailu, you have recently Lujiazui, and then maybe some smaller areas. But that's it. And rents in some of those areas could be very, very high. For example, if we want this much, 1 square meter, it could cost up to 40 RMB a day. What this means is for a 1,000 square meter store, that's over 1 million RMB per month. So you have to have a lot of sales for that in order to make a profit. And whereas in department stores, even though the department store takes away 40% of your revenue, the space requirement is much smaller. The merchandise can be much more concentrated. And if I just give you a rough range, in flagship stores, very large 2,000 square meter stores, the revenue per square meter could be 24,000 RMB per month. But in a concession in a department store, it could be 2.5 times that. So you see why people, brands lose money by building up their brand image in these beautiful stores, but they're actually making it back in franchising or in concessions in department stores.
So this applies to other countries as well, right? Because real estate is not a unique problem to Shanghai or to China. You know, you have flagship stores in London, in Paris, in New York. So you have the same problem.
Right. But if you look at Shanghai and Hong Kong, for example, where real estate prices for prime locations are almost similar, you have other challenges in Shanghai. For example, even though import duties were lowered from 25% to about 15 to 20% now, that doesn't apply in Hong Kong.
Right.
And the VAT for clothing doesn't apply in Hong Kong. So for a store to operate successfully, right away there's that extra margin they have to make up.
Ken has also observed a trend for new entry overseas fashion brands to expand their presence via high street unit stores in order to raise brand awareness. And now it's time to take a look at what's happening in the corporate world this week.